Hello, everyone. Welcome to Math Without Limits. I am Kathleen Welch. I am a middle school history and religion teacher at Southington Catholic, and I was asked to speak to you about how we offer support for math classes in other areas of learning. So, for some people, math just isn't their thing. And, if math is like Greek to you, we still offer support. We still teach different ways of looking at numbers, different ways of learning math in our subject areas. And, I had to put this slide in because, quite honestly, I took more credits of ancient Greek in college than I did of math. So, I might be one of the ones who math is a little bit Greek to me. So let's get started. One example, I want us to jump right into religion. How can we offer support in religion? When does math ever come up? Well, one example is you read the story of Noah, specifically with 6th grade. I think we also get into it in 7th grade. You read it in your textbook, take out the Bible and read the story in the Bible, then take your class outside and actually measure out the size of the ark. 6th graders love this activity because the ark was enormous, and it gets them measuring, it gets them adding the numbers. They really enjoy it. It's just an get up and move kind of activity, and they love it. So that is one example coming from religion class. Our next example is with Catholic social teaching. I get into Catholic social teaching quite a bit, particularly with 8th grade. We look at numbers in Catholic social teaching. We look at how many people are impacted by poverty, how many people are impacted by unemployment, human trafficking, all kinds of things. And there is a great website called gapminder.com, and I took a screenshot and put it here on this slide because it is an animated website, and clearly not animated here. However, when you use it, when you put it into play, you can compare two different items. Here I have the total population compared to how many people live in extreme poverty, which is measured at below $1.25 a day. And you look at these little colored bubbles that bounce all over the page as time goes on. It shows you the year, and it shows where that country is. Each bubble represents a country. You need to go to the website to really see the impact that it can make. The students learn so much from this. It shows, clearly the blue and the red on the extreme right of the screen have the greatest population. Those are India and China. They have the greatest population, and they have a significant number who live in extreme poverty. And you would see that in the 1990s, they had an enormous number in extreme poverty, and it was much different. And you can see how it has actually decreased in recent years. You can change what you're measuring to look at employment. You can look at all kinds of things that connect to our Catholic social teaching and our outlook on others. We're supposed to be paying attention worldwide to humanity and what we can do for them. So if we get the numbers about who is in these terrible situations, it helps the students to realize that it pays to be active. There are so many people who need us to be active on their behalf. So this is religion, that is Catholic social teaching. I have some examples, several examples from history class. I actually find myself several times a year in each class, I will actually point out, by the way, we just did math and this is history class. And we do. We should point that out so that students see that we use math everywhere. Simple computation. We subtract dates when we're talking about how long ago was this. The students need to figure that out. They can estimate if we're in time periods, estimate how long each period is from another one. In 6th grade, we teach ancient history. And like I said here, when in Rome, use Roman numerals. They should learn Roman numerals. They should have fun with them, because if you're adding and subtracting in Roman numerals, they're actually adding and subtracting numbers. So again, it might seem a little basic, but it is support. It is using numbers outside of math class. Now we're going to move on to timelines. Now, I'm a big proponent of timelines. I think students should be able to visualize when things fall in history. So they should be able to have a timeline in their head for the period that they're studying. So this is, your basic horizontal timeline, and this is from ancient history, so it crosses over from BC to AD. However, I also think we should use vertical timelines, because using each kind of timeline helps the student to accept the axes on a graph when they're asked in, say, algebra to graph something. They're graphing the y-intercept, they're graphing a parabola, and I'm hoping that that is what they graph at this age. I'm not sure, because I don't teach that. However, I think that it just helps them to have that introduction to the axes on a graph. Now, this next timeline shows the Roman Empire crossing over from BC to AD, and I find that so important because it gives the students the concept that there are numbers beyond zero, which comes into play when you're teaching negative and positive numbers. And the students notice that. And then if we're comparing how long ago was that, they have to actually remember that they're actually using negative and positive numbers when we're adding and subtracting there. So I hope this is making sense to you. I hope it is of some help. Let's see, what do I have next? Oh, next I have a specific example in U.S. history. We teach slavery. And I took a picture of this record of sale from a slave auction in South Carolina. And what I do with this, in Connecticut, we're always looking at the Civil War, slavery from the northern point of view. However, slavery occurred for over 200 years. So why is that? So I have this lesson to look at the economic aspects of slavery. So it's really somewhat looking at it from the Southern point of view. Why did they think this was such a great thing? So we look at this record of sale and we compare ages and price and skills, their qualifications, and what the students have to do after, excuse me, after they've looked at this and compared data. They then create graphs, and this is one that a group of 3 students created. They did it in a flash. I couldn't believe how fast they were. They compared age and price, and it's good for them to get used to drawing a graph, knowing where, what labels they need, how to establish the numbers, how far apart the numbers should be. So this is a very well put together graph, and they ended up concluding that, slaves in their late teens, early 20s were the most valuable based on their price and their skills. So that is one way. This is the same type of activity. It is looking at a slave auction result. Now, this is a letter. It's not a letter. I'm sorry. It's an article that was printed in the Liberator, which was a newspaper published by a well-known abolitionist. Now, this is significant, I promise. The numbers and the information in there are presented almost as a word problem would be presented. So my students would need to go into this article and pull out the important information and use it in the same way. Create a chart, compare the data, and then create a graph. So I almost find this to be the better activity. If I had to choose between those two, just looking at the record of sale or looking at this article, I would choose looking at the article, because I found with my children and with going through school, choosing the important information in a word problem is difficult for some students. And this is good practice for them. They have to find the right numbers to use for whatever their graph is going to be. So are they going to pull out the ages, or are they going to pull out the price? It all depends. And sometimes they need both. So this is another activity that is very appropriate for middle school students. And this was an actual article that was published. So it's just interesting that way too. Okay, where are we going next? Oh, Andrew Jackson. If you're going to study U.S. history, you study the Jacksonian era. And there are two things that you always study when you study Andrew Jackson. And one of them is the national debt. Andrew Jackson was the only president to pay off the national debt in U.S. history. So that should always come up. Now, the reason that I look at that is because after we talk about what Jackson did, we then bring it to current day and we look at the U.S. debt clock. And this is a screenshot from maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, so it's even higher. And it's a sad look at our national debt. However, the things you can do with this, we have all these numbers on here. You could, I just take it and play with the numbers. You can figure out the percentage of total, of how much of the total personal debt is credit card debt, because our students all connect to that. You know, they know that their parents using credit cards. So those numbers are on here. We see total personal debt, and if you go to the right, you see credit card debt. So you can figure out that percentage. You can figure out how much of the, what the percentage of federal tax revenue is income tax revenue. You can take any of these numbers and put them together to figure out percents, or, switch them into decimals or make them fractions, all those kinds of good things that we do to play with numbers. And it just gets the students more comfortable with it. Now, if you look at this, screen to the right is all kinds of census information. So again, this is actually just interesting information to discuss. We have the total U.S. population, and just to the right of that, we have how many are officially unemployed. So you can figure out the percentage of unemployed. You can go toward further down toward the bottom and figure out the percentage of U.S. population, figure out the percentage of prison inmates out of the U.S. population. And, this could then morph into a Catholic social teaching discussion. So we can combine all kinds of things here, and we're still playing with numbers. The next thing that you look at when you talk about Andrew Jackson is voting, because Andrew Jackson created this great sense of patriotism, and people wanted to be involved in government. And in 1840, we had one of the highest, if not the highest, voter turnout in U.S. history. So again, you compare maps. You could compare any map with 1840. Compare the numbers. You have percentages there. You can figure out, according to population. You can do all kinds of things with these numbers. And again, it creates an interesting discussion. All right. I also teach geography. So when we look at geography, we look at statistics. We look at population. We compare the population of different countries. So again, you can create maps. You can work with percentages or fractions. Also in my class, I require, we have a year-long project requirement called Travel Fair. And they have certain assignments to do. And one of them, they have to provide a graph showing an aspect of Catholic social teaching. So they could show relief effort, they could show poverty, they could show hunger, they could show sweatshop involvement. This graph here is a graph that one of my students did for this year on the unemployment rate in Greece. So again, they're researching, they're putting the numbers together, they're showing how the numbers make a difference. Now, I have never taught elementary grades. However, I did take a glance at the curriculum, and I do know that you look at community in the lower grades in social studies. So if you're looking at community, you could draw a map. Now, this is a fabulous map here. I could never draw something like this. However, you could use it to practice shapes. You could use it to practice measurement. And as you go through the elementary grades, I'm sure measurement becomes more and more important. You can introduce vocabulary such as intersection or parallel. Those are the kind of words that you need as you get into the older grades in math. And here's another way, I'm sure 4th, 5th graders could measure using the scale on a map. And, measurement is very important. It's an important skill to have. One other thing in the elementary curriculum is the use of a budget. You could put together a small budget. And again, you're looking at how much money you have, how much can you spend. This is practice in using money. It's practice in decimals. You could make more graphs. I keep talking about graphs. It seems like all I'm doing today. In years past, my fellow teachers and I have created an enrichment week. And one year we created a sim city. We did a simulated type city out of the upstairs of our school. And students had to follow a budget, and they kept their budget on a computer, and they had to, they had a particular job, and they had to go to the grocery store, and they had to do all of these real life things. But it was all very active, going from one room to another. We had, everything. One room was a bank, one room was their job. It was an interesting real life activity. Many of them found out they could not actually buy the car that they wanted because they just didn't have the budget for it. So that was a fun real life activity. As we wrap up, I wanted to share with you a few websites that I find useful. First is the gapminder.com website that I told you about with the statistics for Catholic social teaching or just great conversations in your classroom. I use a graph maker. I use a 3D timeline maker. And the iPad app EduCreations is great for shapes and drawing and just doing your math on the iPad and quickly erasing. So for anyone who doesn't know about that, it's a great thing. And last but not least, I had to include this cartoon because I understand that child very well. Today x equals 3. Yesterday he just said it was 2. So I hope you got something out of this webinar. I hope it was understandable. And I hope to see you soon at a conference. Take care.